Have you ever heard of the term, the benefit outweighs the risk? Have you ever heard that? Have you heard that you can be injured seriously by complying with a very, let's just say, possibly dangerous act? And yet, have you ever heard the term, and people use it, don't they? The benefit outweighs the risk. Well, let me explain to you here what's actually happening there. When someone says to you, the benefit outweighs the risk, is a very, very good story that nothing can prove doesn't exist. Again, those 6 words. Nothing can prove story doesn't exist. The benefit outweighs the risk. This is how this works. You have a person in your society that is very, very beneficial to how your society operates. Maybe that person is well respected, and that person is a benefit to the community. They're kind, considerate, they have an affection and a responsibility to the community. They assist the community in many aspects, and without their involvement, we would probably not benefit from their presence or their ability. But then something happens. With everything that's beneficial that comes from the act of that person, or the appearance of that person, or the story of that person, something happens that is nefarious about that person. There are stories floating around that that person has been up to something which people would regard as, let's just say, not good. Something bad has happened. And yet, we continue like nothing has happened because of one thing. Because we've been trained, we've been indoctrinated. Because every time we see that person, or we see a thing, the story appears that we subconsciously were trained or indoctrinated or storied to death that the benefit outweighs the risk. And if you can't read into what I'm saying, I'm talking about when a child has been taken advantage of, and no one wants to really act upon the fact that that child has been proven to have been affected by the certain act of a certain person. But we switch our minds to, well, yes, there might be the odd person that is affected by a certain act. But to most of us, the benefit outweighs the risk. It's amazing, isn't it? We take something that is beneficial, and that's how clever it is, isn't it? It first aligns itself with stories, surrounds itself with stories that nothing can prove doesn't exist. Therefore, we accept the existence. Then, if something appears that is also something that one can't prove doesn't exist, we look at the risks, don't we? We look at the risk of that existence. We look at the risk of the possibility of harm, and then we say to ourselves, subconsciously, it's not intentional, well, the benefit outweighs the risk. But the biggest problem you had was the benefit was a story that you can't prove doesn't exist. But the risk was a story that you can prove exists. They manipulate you with things that you can't prove doesn't exist. They bombard you with things you can't prove don't exist. They don't bombard you with things that you can prove exist, do they? So that person that was doing some evil shit with a child is not the benefit outweighs the risk. It's the benefit fooled you into. There is no risk until the possibility becomes real. See, if you look at what they appear to be in the story, it's a nothing can prove story doesn't exist. The problem is, their story is so much more larger than your story or my story that it becomes the story outweighs a story. The benefit outweighs the risk is not a proven thing. It's a story that is more beneficial than the story that some one person tries to put across. We hate conflict. We like to see things that are easier to live with. We take the path of least resistance. And when you're dealing with someone that has some stories that you can't prove don't exist, like how they are helpful and good, you've been told that over and over again, that they're worth being honoured and worshipped almost. You can't remove that story, can you? Because nothing can prove story doesn't exist. That's what I'm going on and on and on about, is that you can't beat story because you're using story to beat what already exists. So you're using what exists already to defeat an existence. Nothing can prove story doesn't exist. So the benefit outweighs the risk is proof that story outweighs story. Because if you take the list of benefits and you take the list of risks, which one do you think you can disprove? Well, neither of them. But the benefit outweighs the risks is trying to say that a really good, important person in society, in our community, is way better to have than not having them. Doesn't make sense, does it?